of technology. And here to keep you on the bleeding edge of science, tech, and ethics is the Rated R radio star, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Woo! Do they make them any better? Do they make them any hotter than the best goddamn tech show in the world today? Woo! That is, of course, Sovryn Tech, and I am, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R, radio star, Dr. Brian Sovryn, ready for this week's show. And this week's show, I'll tell you, I am alone. So I'm glad a lot of people really enjoyed last week's episode where we had the amazing Tatiana Moroz on, and I definitely cannot implore you enough to take part in her Tatiana Coin campaign. She's been making the rounds this week. Holy shit! I've heard her on almost every show, and really everybody. I heard her on Declare Your Independence, which I've been on quite a few times, and Ernie was like, "Wow, this is literally revolutionary." I mean, he was so excited about it, so cool. Anyway, of course, if you want to check out more of her stuff, TatianaCoin.com, or you can go to TatianaMoroz.com. It'll take you to the same place. But baby, you're not here for that right now. You're here for all the latest science and tech news, and boy, do we have it. But before I get into it, I want to announce something that's exciting the hell out of me. And that is, now, a technology that I have been talking about way back in 2013 when the white paper originally came out, that being zero coin, or of course the basis in the cryptocurrency space for zero knowledge proofs. Way back when that was all drawn up, and I was, say, all right, Bitcoin, let's take advantage of this and all the shit, and it never happened. I'm not going to talk about why that is. I've talked about it too many times on this show. But then, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, suddenly zero coin was coming back, and but now it's being called Zcash. And then, of course, just in late 2016, Zcash became a reality. An absolute reality. And I was so excited about that. Of course, I've had the absolutely amazing Paige Peterson on to talk about it. She is with Zcash. And now, finally, I am actually accepting Zcash for donations to this show. Long accepted Bitcoin. Of course, there's Patreon, which new patrons every single week, and people are just going nuts over the Patreon, the Q&A episodes. In fact, I've had some people tell me they like the Patreon episodes more than they like the Sovryn Tech episodes. So, which I'm honored by that. So, but of course, I always save the big stuff for this show. Don't you worry. And it'll always be free. So anyway, but if you want to donate to the show, you most certainly can. And Zcash is now an option for you. If you go to zog.ninja, it's the very top post at zog.ninja, it shows the addresses. The addresses will also be in the show notes for every episode from episode 213, which we're on now, going forward. Now, I offer the transparent address. I also offer the shielded address. The shielded address, that's where, Zcash becomes interesting. With the transparent one, it's cool. Zcash still does very interesting things and has some great ideas being implemented into it or have already been implemented into it. But the real beauty is the shielded, the encrypted, transfer that you can do, effectively, with Zcash. The sending of, and nobody knows who sent what, where, why. I mean, that's where it gets really exciting. And not everybody, it's very easy to get a Zcash transparent address. And I'm not going to say it's necessarily difficult to get a shielded one or to get a shielded one set up. We talked about this when we had Paige on. I think it was episode 202 or 203, something like that, where we had Paige on to talk about Zcash. And we talked about kind of the higher RAM requirements needed to be able to do shielded transactions with Zcash. So anyway, I have Zcash all set up, good to go, shielded address and all, and that's my preferred way of transacting. So if you want to send Zcash, you don't have to send one Zcash or one ZEC, I think they're calling it. You could send me 0.000001 if you wanted to. So, but anyway, I think I may be the first show that is accepting shielded donations for Zcash. I could be wrong about that, But if I'm not the first, I'm certainly one of the first. So anyway, very excited about this technology and that it's a thing and that it exists out there. It's just so goddamn cool. So anyway, if you want to donate with Zcash, of course, just look in the show notes, or again, you can go to the website zog.ninja. And if you are wondering about the website, I am planning on next week to finally unveil the new website. It has been a long time coming. Zog.ninja will still take you there. Don't worry. It's kind of a forwarding URL to whatever I consider important at the time, really. And so I'm planning on that being out there. And I mean, it's what's planned. Sometimes life gets in the way, and boy, can life get in the way with things a lot of times. But I think we all understand how that goes. So anyway, so Zcash, I mean, just exciting things happening with Sovryn Tech, obviously, and so honored by having so many patrons. We're just about a third of the way to our first Patreon goal, which will allow for 2 totally free Sovryn Tech Prime episodes, as I call them, which is what you're listening to now. Two of those per week will become the reality once we reach $500 a month on Patreon. So thank you all so much to all the patrons that are already donating to that, have been longtime donors, and those that have just come on board, because there's a lot of great content. Got a ton of new content coming out next week. Exciting stuff. So anyway, all right. Let's get into some of our, what we call the foreplay, where it's all the little tidbits of news that honestly sometimes I end up talking about for 20 minutes. But whatever. It's where I just cover the little interesting things that don't really need an entire segment. So here we go with the foreplay. Starting off, and of course, the real start off was that, we're now accepting Zcash donations, which is very exciting. But starting off with, this is something, the conversation of passwords, it's actually something that I kind of did a deep dive in, and I'm going to be doing another deep dive in a Patreon Q&A episode. People had asked about, what's kind of the best, passwords to use, what's the best way to generate a password and all of this. So of course the topic, the subject came to, well, what's next? What is something going to replace passwords and all this? And it's really kind of happening in sort of in similar ways and sort of not. So one of the things that's coming out that Microsoft actually announced with the creators update to Windows 10, which is their next major update. Again, Microsoft is doing 2 updates, generally 2 updates per year for Windows 10. And I know the bulk of my listeners use Windows, so this is relevant. And so what an idea that they're putting into the Creators Update, which honestly, the Creators Update, as far as all the features that I keep reading about, this is probably going to be the largest update to Windows 10, since it came out. In fact, a lot of it is really so drastic. So Microsoft's not going to announce, there's not going to be a Windows 11 anymore, ever. Everything's just going to be Windows 10 from here on out. Kind of like how, Mac OS, or back when it was called OS 10, OS 10 would be OS 10.1, OS 10.2. They've gone to that sort of cycle, which is, fine, whatever. But really, if there was ever to be a Windows 11, honestly, the Creators Update that's coming out in March 2017 HE, I would think, that this would almost be like Windows 11. It just feels like it's that big of a jump. So a new feature that's coming out for the Creators Update of Windows 10 is going to be what's called Dynamic Lock. Now, Windows 10 it's been pretty interesting in all of the different ways that it allows for you to log in to Windows 10. And it makes sense that they've created a lot of different ways. And we'll talk about what Dynamic Lock is in just a second. Because, Windows 10 it doesn't have to be, but for the average person, it's very tied into their Microsoft account. Okay, so you want to offer a lot of security to secure an account, right? Of course, it's a great idea to do. Now, I don't agree with every way that Microsoft has laid out to how you can log into Windows 10, and it's not just for desktops and laptops. It also works on Windows 10 Mobile, which might be superfluous, but whatever. So there's what is Windows Hello, right? Where you can unlock Windows if you have. Is it a RealSense camera? Yeah, I think it's an Intel RealSense camera or whatever. You have to have a very specific type of camera, but it can unlock just by seeing your face. Okay, not like a new thing necessarily, because a lot of Android phones could do this. Of course, it's kind of touch and go with the Android phones as to where with Windows Hello, it was usually pretty good. But I think biometrics are just a terrible form of security. Absolutely fucking terrible. Every single idea, even the one where it's attached to your heartbeat, I think they're all just horrendous ideas, and they're all just rife for being, mimicked, and thus being, cracked through mimicry, among other things. So Windows Hello allows for, facial recognition. It allows for, fingerprint, biometrics, a lot of different ideas. I never recommend using Windows Hello. I like I said, just a terrible idea. Then there's also the one that I don't think is bad is to where, because this is, it's just a little bit extra. Like one of the problems with, so, okay, like I said, Windows 10 is attached to it's very much attached to your Windows 10 account. Again, it doesn't have to be, but usually that's how people set it up. Like my Microsoft, my passwords are ridiculously long. And to log into my computer every time, say, with a Windows 10 machine, with my, Microsoft account password, it just, it's annoying, frankly. And that's the old trade-off, right, between security and convenience. There's always that trade-off. Yeah, I get it. But something that I think with the anniversary update of Windows 10 that they added in, I don't remember exactly when it was, but they added in the ability to log in with a 6-digit PIN number. And this is fine, because this is generally how all of smartphones are locked, and it works pretty well. As long as it's 6 digits, 4 digits, you're kind of wasting your time. But the 6-digit PIN number login, I think, is a great idea. So kudos to Microsoft for setting that up. And generally, that's what I would set up on a machine, is the 6-digit PIN. And now they're coming out with what's called dynamic lock, where dynamic lock allows you to, and I'm not exactly sure, as far as I could tell from reading it, it works. You don't have to have a Windows 10 mobile device. It looks like it works with Android and iOS. So whatever the app is, maybe it's Cortana that you have to have installed on the phone. I'm not 100% sure right now. We probably won't officially know until come March 2017, which the Holocene calendar folks read about it. Obviously, I mean 2017, but. So you could have your phone, and this isn't new, like Chromebooks can do this, where it, recognizes that your phone is nearby, and your phone actually, just your phone's kind of presence can unlock, your laptop or your desktop. I'm not like 100% opposed to this. It's an interesting idea. Of course, the problem is if, like somebody borrows your phone, I guess they could run off and, who borrows their phone anymore? Like, this is a kind of a big conversation, right? Like, the fact, really the only way that a lot of security-based features that are based off of your smartphone actually work is from the network effect of the fact that everybody pretty much has a smartphone. If it didn't, I don't think we'd be relying on our smartphones for security much. Just because, you're handing over your phone to people. You're letting people play with your phone. You're letting people use your phone, blah, blah, blah. So, keep that in mind, that a lot of these ideas, the second device security ideas, which I'm not opposed to all of them, but they only work because everybody has one and they don't need to use yours. This is true for the Google codes, the Authenticator codes, all this, not the Google codes, but just, a lot of people use Google Authenticator for their Authenticator codes, or they use Authy or something like this. That's really the only way this works. So anyway, dynamic lock, phone's there, boom, it unlocks it. Again, not really a terrible idea. I'm not exactly certain also, it's not 100% clear. Is this using Bluetooth? Is this somehow using NFC? Because which I imagine is using Bluetooth, because it'd be very limiting to how many laptops and desktops have NFC? They generally don't. Maybe the newest laptops might have it. So anyway, it's not a terrible idea. Because this is sort of the post-password thing. And I agree with it in the abstract. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with Microsoft's implementation in Windows 10 with Dynamic Lock. what I am I'm intrigued by is like a Squirrel, like Steve Gibson's Squirrel technology, which is going to be coming out, where it's this kind of QR code handshake that you need two devices to do. Squirrel will be on your smartphone, and then the QR code will show up on whatever website you're visiting, or I'm sure it could be implemented with software and apps as well. And you'll scan it, boop, handshake's done, and you're logged in. You don't need a password anymore. Okay, now that's a great idea. I really think that's a hell of just a very impressive idea. So, that sort of thing is, that's a lot different than just having your phone shows up and boop. Because there has to be more of a direct action that you do. So, but I get it. I think this is the right direction, that our security is based upon, yes, it's two-factor, but maybe more accurately, it's two-device security. That you need to, that all the security happens through the fact that you own two devices. And of course, one of those devices is a very personal one, say like a smartphone. So this is a good direction to go. This is definitely how we get to post-password. And I'll be keeping an eye on and talking more about dynamic lock in the future, but I think that this idea is going to become very, very popular. And it's probably going to become more popular too when at some point I got to imagine, and there's already been patents, floating around from Samsung and some others, to where you're literally, like with your laptop, you're literally plugging in your smartphone, to a device. And, and that, not that it necessarily may power the PC or the computer or something, but it's going to become a big part of it and may unlock a lot of features like the ability to do phone calls, which is something else that Windows 10 is baking into the Creators Update. So we're in for some interesting hybrid action, I guess is the bottom line. But dynamic lock, not a terrible idea. I'll just have to see, more about how exactly, it ends up getting implemented. So anyway, all right, let's move on to another story. Speaking of phones, hell, why don't we keep right on the track here? Now, this is interesting. At Mobile World Congress 2017, or Mobile World Congress 2017, which I used to go to Mobile World Congress all the time, and it's in Barcelona. It's a fantastic little event. Well, it's not little at all, but I enjoyed Mobile World Congress in a lot of ways. It gets kind of crazy. Some of the setups by some of the larger companies like Samsung and some others, are just nuts, and you're not really seeing I don't always feel like you're seeing what's actually going to come to market there, even though the claim is usually that, oh no, this is all to market. Prototypes have crept in recent years. I haven't been there, in recent years at all. But anyway, it's one of the more interesting shows to go to. I think it's actually more important than CES. I think it's more important. Nothing against CES, and we actually got some exclusive reporting on Patreon from Sovryn Tech patrons about CES. That was great. So with Mobile World Congress coming up, there's an announcement of a phone. Now, smartphone, and it's a funny thing, right? Because really, what more are they going to do with smartphones? What is there even really to talk about with smartphones most of the time, other than these abstract ideas of using them as a way to unlock your other devices, right? Like with, Microsoft Dynamic Lock. Probably the most talked about thing and the most looked forward to thing and the most written about thing coming up to Mobile World Congress 2017 is not a smartphone at all, but it is a phone. And this is so wild. The Nokia 3310. Ooh, the Nokia 3310 is coming back. Now, here's another one where we don't have all the details, but regardless, I think it makes a statement. Now, the Nokia 3310, this is a phone, what was it? It came out in like 2000? Just eons ago, especially in the tech space. And it is considered probably the most used, most popular phone, ever on the planet. And definitely its numbers were far outselling, like even what iPhone did, as far as I understand them. And it's a slick little device, but understand it's a dumb phone. It has like 4 games on it. I think it has like 2 versions of Snake, and it had a couple other games on it. But just tough as fucking nails. It doesn't have a full QWERTY on it. That'd be the one thing that would keep me from turning it into my daily driver if I ever got my hands on it again. But just tough as nails. Like there's videos, you can go online, you can find videos where people are putting these things through a hydraulic press because it's the only thing that can crush them. People run over them with cars. They drop them in traffic and they just keep on ticking. Just a near indestructible phone. Phenomenal. Now, as far as I know, they were never waterproof. But, maybe they're updating that. The other thing, too, is that, like, there's no real analog networks, cell networks anymore. And as far as I know, the Nokia 3310 was always analog, was designed for analog cell networks. And that's the reason that they stopped making it, really. Wasn't because it wasn't selling around the world, but because, they were kind of outdated. So they're probably going to update the radios in it to some degree, I would imagine. Otherwise, what is it going to connect to? But I still think, I thought this was so cool. So many people shared this with me, about the Nokia 3310, because people know how much I love dumb phones. And I mean, there's a ton of articles today, coming out, or in recent, shall we say, in the past month, and you can imagine why that is in the past month, ever since perhaps, say, January 20th, people are suddenly like, oh, I need to get a burner phone. Well, the Nokia 3310, I don't think would hurt you. $60, I think that's what they're going to end up running for. They're not, I don't think it's looking at the U.S. market, but you can get your hands on them, through whatever site that you need to. And I think it's amazing. I think it's awesome. I mean, we talked about it probably about a year and a half ago on Sovryn Tech, how, the black market, I don't want to say drug dealers because that sounds offensive. Okay. The black market was going back to buying old Nokia dumb phones. Because they considered, because these people, and they have, understand, in the black market, okay, I mean, you have some of the best, hackers, security researchers, InfoSec guys in the world working for these, this market. How would I say it that way? And their recommendations are, do not use smartphones. If you want actual security, get rid of the fucking smartphone. How about that? And I mean, you could say, well, shouldn't they be using Signal? We'll talk about Signal in a second. Shouldn't they be using Signal or something? Isn't that the best? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but is that level of encryption, while great and, solid in my opinion, and the best in the world in many ways, is it important to use that level of encryption, or is it more important to not have all of the metadata, that all of the apps, that all this other shit that a smartphone collects on you that you can't really do much about, no matter how encrypted your text is that you sent through Signal. So it's interesting that the black market is looking heavy at using a lot of these older phones. And it'll be interesting I can't wait to see the teardown of a new Nokia 3310 that comes out, because I wonder if there's going to be anything added as far as that goes. But personally, I'd like to get my hands on one. I wouldn't mind having a little second burner phone. I mean, for my network provider, I use Straight Talk, which, I have the SIM card. Pretty much I didn't buy the phone from them. I just have a SIM card from them. So I can swap that out and put it in any phone I want. And so if at any point, I could end up putting it into a Nokia 3310. We're actually going to talk about, during HackSec, a situation where the Nokia 3310 might be a great thing to have, and just switching out SIM cards and all this, right? So anyway, I thought that was exciting. $60. I mean, you really can't go wrong, with wanting to own one of those. And personally, I'd love to just send the market signal, even honestly, whether or not I used it. I'd love to send the market signal that, no, there's still a market for dumb phones. We're not all trusting the smartphone revolution, as it were. So anyway, let's move on to something else here. And this is interesting because we were talking about pins earlier, pin numbers to unlock something. That is definitely the way that I recommend, locking your phone. Do not, even if you have an iPhone, whatever you're using, iPhone, Android, whatever, do the pin lock, especially 6-digit pin locks. Because this is something that I thought was interesting, and this has gotten talked about quite a bit, but I just want to, let people know about it in case they didn't. But there had been research done, and I think it was, or at least it was Sophos, which is a security company. They sell antivirus and all this different stuff, concentrating primarily on mobile, but they also have desktop solutions. But they had done a write-up about security researchers that were able to, they didn't even have to be looking, by using a camera, by using, surveillance cameras, they were able to tell, and they didn't have to be like over your shoulder or anything, but they were able to tell. With Android, you have the pattern lock, right? Where you use your, finger, thumb, whatever, to draw out like a pattern that unlocks your phone, as compared to using a PIN or facial recognition. And just by having, all different kinds of angles, and just for a few seconds, they could see and they could know, they could figure out just from the surveillance footage what your what your pattern lock scheme is. And actually, ironically, the more complex your pattern lock was, like say it was a bunch of X's and a triangle and all this shit, it was actually even easier to figure out what it was. And I mean, from all different kinds of viewing angles, they could, they could figure this out just from camera footage. And I mean, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the pattern locks are really secure, blah, blah, blah. No. Your PIN number is far, far more secure. So, I mean, and they're able to do this because there's a very specific area. There's only like nine dots, I think, on the Android pattern lock. And, there's on pretty much every Android phone where exactly, those dots appear and where to do it. So, I mean, it's amazing. You think about it. You wouldn't think about it initially, but then when you think about it, it's like, well, of course they can do that. Like, that just makes total sense that that's possible. So if you're using Android pattern lock, turn that shit off and get a 6-digit, at least, PIN code, on your Android phone. So that just a quick story that I thought was interesting. I mean, and it speaks to kind of the pin locking that we were talking about with Windows 10. Another little bit of phone news, a lot of phone news, even though there's nothing really to say about smartphones themselves. But I thought this was interesting is that Verizon is now bringing back unlimited plans. And I think they finally felt the squeeze. I mean, this is kind of the nature of competition. And that is, it's true. Like I remember, I've seen I don't really watch much television, like network television, but I've, here and there, I've seen the commercials where ironically, Sprint has they hired the guy that used to do the Can You Hear Me Now campaign, right, for Verizon. He comes on now and he says, there's like a 3% difference between Sprint and Verizon's network. There's no difference anymore. And so that's the thing, is that Verizon used to be able to charge a premium, used to, get away with not having an unlimited plan because of the very fact that, well, there's just huge swaths of the country where only Verizon reaches. That is becoming no longer true. As to where now, like Sprint can reach all those areas. And there's interesting things happening with that too. Apparently there may be a Sprint T-Mobile merger. They might become the same company. Ooh boy. How's that going to work out? Just because I guess SoftBank hasn't been very impressed with Sprint's performance. But Sprint was the one, that was still allowing for genuine unlimited, data, even though they have a cutoff point, like they start throttling you after, and I ran into this because I used to be a Sprint customer. I ran into where if I did 30 gigs of data, like that I'd start getting throttled, and they throttle you hard. Now, granted, Verizon, same thing. They came right out and said, if you do above 20 gig, we're going to throttle you. So it doesn't excite me, like it really doesn't do anything for me. And I forget exactly what the prices were, but it's still like really, really high. And the fact that, really what these companies need to get into, I mean, the unlimited data, I'm glad that that's happening. And again, you can see it's happening just purely out of, market competition. What I'd really like to see is to where they are allowing you all to bring your own phone. Like that's got to become the thing. And Sprint and Verizon are both really lagging behind on how that goes. Now, if T-Mobile and Sprint combine, like I wonder how exactly that's going to work. I mean, and you kind of got shades of what's happening with Sprint and T-Mobile in the fact that, like, doesn't Google Fi use both? Google Fi uses Google uses Sprint and T-Mobile as their network. So they're already pretty compatible. Might as well. Boy, wouldn't that be a hell of a thing? I'm not making this as a prediction. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked if suddenly, like, Google just bought. I don't know how it would get past antitrust laws, especially with President Trump in office. But if Google, AlphaGoog bought T-Mobile and Sprint, and then, made their entire network Google Fi. Boy, that'd be a hell of a thing. So anyway, Verizon's, they recognize that people are running away from their network because of the limited data. I mean, it's not like, the problem was with Verizon, like it would have been different if they did like T-Mobile does or like Straight Talk or some others do, to where, okay, yeah, you'll get 4G up to like 5 or 10 gig, but then, after that, you'll still get data, but we're just going to throttle you. No, they just cut off data. after whatever you were paying for with your plan. So I mean that's why people were running away. And now, of course, AT&T, with AT&T you can get an unlimited plan again, but like you have to buy into the AT&T universe, their entire ecosystem. You have to get TV, you have to get all their other shit. To be able to access that. So, but that's interesting. So we're getting back to, and I'm not sure how exactly they're going to justify this, because the claim used to be we can't do unlimited because of congestion. But more and more people are owning smartphones, and there's not that many more towers getting built, at least not Verizon. So, I want to find out where's the lie. I think that saying that their networks were like congested, other than within like major cities, which I guess maybe you could say that's where they make the bulk of their money. Yeah, something's not right, because they're not answering that fact. Like, why aren't they addressing, hey, wait a second, actually congestion's not that bad, or something like this? Like, how are they able to do it, as to where before they were literally saying it was technically impossible to offer, those were their words, it is impossible to offer unlimited data on Verizon. I guess it's not impossible anymore. And that was only a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. They couldn't have built that many towers in that amount of time. Like, I know how the rollouts go. Whatever. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting that finally they're backpedaling and saying, oh yeah, we're gonna go unlimited, probably because they were tanking like there's no tomorrow. Now, something that uses your data plan, and that might be a good idea to have an unlimited data plan for, is Signal came out with an update this week, and I am so pleased that this is an app that, for a multitude of reasons, could really sit on its, rest on its laurels. Like, it doesn't necessarily need a bunch of updates, right? It does what it does it well, and for a lot of people even, they more want to use another app that just implements the Signal protocol as compared to using the Signal app itself. Of course, I heartily recommend just use Signal. Don't go with WhatsApp, don't go with Google Allo, don't do any of that bullshit, just use Signal. And honestly, like, a lack of updates for the security community would actually be seen almost as a good thing, right? I give this example a lot of times because it's the most extreme and best and real. And the example is with, Debian Linux. Like, with Debian, anytime you want to, even if you want to add a wallpaper to the Debian base, just the Linux base, there's a huge argument about that. No, don't do it, because who knows what this is going to bring in? It could affect this. It's taken that seriously. Even just adding in a wallpaper. Okay, so adding in features to Signal, like for some security researchers, they'd be like, oh, good, don't do it. Like, the code's fine, let's stick with it. Not that you don't do updates, of course. Everybody has to. There's, new security bugs found all the time, even with Linux, obviously. In fact, more so sometimes. But that's the seriousness. That's what I'm saying, is that people wouldn't mind. There is definitely a segment of people that wouldn't mind if Signal never really updated much. But they do keep on adding features. We talked about how they recently were adding in features that allowed it to surpass various censoring implementations taken by governments around the world, like in Egypt and Turkey. And now they are actually adding in video calling. It's in beta. Like, the video calling itself is in beta. Now, I want to talk about that for a second. Okay, but it's in beta. And if you don't know what Signal is, folks, please, Open Whisper Systems, go look it up. All right? I think everybody knows what Signal is now, especially, ever since Trump went into office. And so normally it just had text and it had audio calling, but now it's actually allowing for video calling. Now, I've messed with it a little bit, and it's very bare bones. That's okay too. It doesn't need to have a whole ton of features. But you're obviously going to want that unlimited plan for this. But watch how you have to set it up. You have to go into, I think it's with the Android app anyway. You go to advanced, you go to little three dots, you go to advanced, then you go into settings, and there's just a little switch you have to hit that will turn on the ability to receive video calls. Now again, this is in beta, and this is sort of the point I want to bring up. I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm not opposed to them setting up encrypted video calling. I think that's great, because really Viber has encrypted video calling. And Whisper, or not Whisper, Whisper, that's what it's called, right? Whisper allows for it. In fact, Whisper even has, if I remember right, when we were announcing it, because they just went open source, or not Whisper, I'm sorry, Wire. Oh, God. Wire, when they went open source in like mid-2016, they ended up, they also added the ability to do encrypted screen sharing, which I think that was kind of a first. So Wire, sorry, not Whisper, Wire was the one that, that already has a lot of these features, interestingly enough. So I don't mind Signal adding them in either. And obviously, using the Signal protocol is fantastic, to allow for it. But here's kind of my problem is that, like, Signal's sort of the ethos, the idea around Signal is that, look, this is what you do to let, so that nothing leaks and so that everything's secure. This is the app that I bet my life on, blah, 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 blah. Like that's really the narrative around it. Not just from me, from other people, around the world. And to have features in beta. Now, I mean, like just last week, I didn't even know this until like a month ago. There's a Signal beta app and I'm like, you'd have a Signal beta app? Like, this is not the thing you want in beta. For what it's supposed to get used for, this is the thing you want to be as stable, as fucking rock solid as you could have. And so I feel a little skittish about this, right? With the video calling feature, that being, it's in the stable release, but it's in beta, and I'm like, I don't want anything in beta on Signal. But even like a week ago, before it was in the stable update that happened this past week, it was there, but I'm like, who's using Signal beta? Like, doesn't that defeat the purpose of Signal? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something as far as like, just how rock solid or what the beta app for Signal actually means. But yeah, that just seems really off to me. So anyway, you can turn it on. I've tested it out. It's interesting. Certainly, I wouldn't use it right now while it's in beta to share anything necessarily important. But hey, there it is. It exists. Just a weird thing. So they're catching up. I don't know. Maybe Signal's losing users to Wire. I can't imagine that. Not that I have any big beef with Wire or anything. I think it does good for what it is. And since it's been open sourced, my only issue, we talked about it when I think some people asked me about Wire. My only issue was that when I went through setting up, to where, because Wire is cross-device, which Signal can be too. You have the Signal messaging app for Chrome, but you have to have Chrome or Chromium installed on your PC. But like when Wire, so you can, whatever messages you get on your smartphone, obviously you can read on the desktop app for Wire. But there's no, like, the way, I don't understand how the handshake was done, how you're, sharing keys over the network to where, like, I didn't see it, like, happen. As to where, like, with the Signal app, when you're setting it up on your when you're pairing it with your smartphone and your PC, you have to, like we were talking about earlier with Squirrel, you scan QR codes. That's how the handshake happens. Okay, it doesn't go over a network. As to where with Wire, it goes over a network, and I feel like you're kind of trusting Wire to handle that handshake and that they don't hand it off to anybody else. Okay, handshake being that exchange of keys or that pairing of keys that allows you to see it on, cross-platform. So anyway, so Signal has video calling now. Cool. I mean, really, it's cool. I just like the beta thing. I'm a little skittish about that. Speaking of phones, also, the Wall Street Journal did a piece this week that a great listener actually shared with me, because generally you have to pay for the Wall Street Journal. But they did a piece about apparently some insiders at both Amazon and at Alphabet/Google, good old AlphaGoog. They are planning on Google Home and Alexa, the Amazon Echo. Both of those are going to end up getting what adds up to speakerphone features, to where they will connect to a landline, the good old Bakelite landline. Of course, they're going to use VoIP effectively as the protocol. But I mean, this is how I was understanding it. But they will become your home phone. Like they will take over as being your home phone, both Google Home and Amazon Echo. This seems so backwards to me, and I can kind of imagine maybe the demographic they're trying to hit with this. Like, I mean, literally, you're talking about the fact that these things are going to, and it's kind of the Achilles heel of it too, that, your little Echo device is going to work as a speakerphone. It's going to work like a phone did 20 years ago. to where somebody calls you, you answer it, and, and you talk on it, and there you go. And when you walk out of the house, you don't have access to that landline anymore. Now, that could get interesting to where if you have like the app, like the Alexa app, or if you have the Google Home app or something, will that allow you to receive calls on your smartphone? Like that. That'll be interesting to see. And again, this is kind of like insider stuff. This may never, come to fruition, but it seems to be, very close to reality. The demographic I could see this reaching out to is, literally, seniors, older people, where they're not, because honestly, like Echo and Google Home, those would be the demographics I think that would want that sort of thing, to where, maybe you're, I don't know, you can't necessarily like see your smartphone screen very well or whatever, or you're not that great with computers, but you can certainly tell, like a device, I would like to do this. Would you order me this? Could you, I've fallen and I can't get up. And I mean that with no disrespect. We all laugh at those old commercials. All these sorts of things. Like I could see that working very well for that demographic. So, maybe turning it into a landline would be what finally replaces the phone for them. And the fact that you'd have such volume controls with that, I could see it becoming very attractive for people of of that, more advanced age. Maybe that's who they're aiming at, because this is the other thing. Like, I just can't imagine that everybody wants to have every fucking conversation on a speakerphone. Like, you want to, you want some kind of privacy. So I think it would still have to end up, my guess is they're going to end up pairing it with the app somehow if this feature actually gets released. And then you could still say, use your smartphone, to answer things that are coming into your new landline that's attached to the Internet of shit, or attached to Alexa, or Google Home. And I could see probably, Microsoft would jump in on this too, because Skype already has so many phone call features and all this. In fact, it's really like, it's almost odd how much Skype is not being leveraged with Cortana and perhaps even with like a smart home device of these digital or not digital virtual assistant systems like Alexa or like the Amazon Echo or like the Google Home or others. So we'll see, but it feels like two steps backwards. Like you finally freed people from the wall, and then you're just attaching them to the wall again. I guess they never really expect you to leave your home anymore, which maybe that's the real plan. I don't know. So anyway, I thought that was, nothing really to take away from that. It's just an interesting development. In fact, honestly, a lot of what we're talking about is sort of an interesting development in that dumb phones are coming back. The most talked about phone coming out of Mobile World Congress in 2017 is the fucking Nokia 3310. It's a 15-year-old phone, for fuck's sake. And now we're talking about connecting landlines again. Woo-hoo-hoo. The more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. So anyway, let's get into our lead story for this week. And this one's kind of fun. We're going to go from the very fun here. And then for Hacksec, we're really going to go into the very serious. So it'll be a nice blend, and then hopefully later on, we're going to get into some more fun. I guarantee you that. But let's get into our main story. And if you're wondering about the audio quality 40 minutes in, I am on location using the old-fashioned Blue Yeti. So I will be in the studio again next week. Don't you worry a thing. But anyway, let's get into this week's story. And this one's kind of fun. This actually got sent in to me by a great listener. So it actually, anyway, I won't go any further than that. But I thought this was fun. This is interesting, and it actually touches on a lot of topics. While at first it may sound very humorous or even ridiculous, it actually speaks quite a bit to some serious ethical questions that I think are coming up right now, and that have really been talked about for 30, 40 years, if not for eternity. But definitely, it's been coming up as late. And this is from Gizmodo, of course. Our nickname for Gizmodo on Sex and Science Hour, and of course on Sovryn Tech here. Sex and Science Hour being the other podcast that I do. But anyway, here we go. Meet the body hacker trying to become a human vibrator. And this is by Kristen Brown. She wrote this up. Yeah, trying to become a human vibrator. Reading here, Rich Lee wants to give you an orgasm, a quote-unquote cyborgasm. For years, Lee has been upset by a dream of becoming a human vibrator, or has been beset, not upset. I'm glad he's not upset. Beset by a dream of becoming a human vibrator, a bionic man endowed with an implant designed explicitly to bring pleasure to the opposite sex. By upgrading his parts down under to include a tiny vibrating device implanted just below the skin, he hopes to also upgrade his status from average Utah dad to that of a cyborg-era Casanova. Turn it on, and the device will give his male appendage machine-powered capabilities that rival some of the world's most popular sex toys, at least in theory. He calls it, wait for it, the Lovetron 9000. Woo! The Golden Stallion loves that. That's good. Lovetron 9000. All right. And he doesn't just envision this cybersexual future for himself. He wants to sell it to you, too. Lee is a grinder, a member of a niche community of biohackers pushing the limits of what it means to be human by augmenting their bodies with all sorts of synthetic parts. He has tiny magnets implanted into his ear that function as built-in earbuds and other magnets in his finger just for fun. He has an implant to sense his temperature and another outfitted with near-field communication, that's NFC, technology that he uses in conjunction with a text-to-speech app to make his phone read aloud bits of text. In his most recent experiment, Lee installed tubes of energy-absorbing non-Newtonian foam under the skin of his leg to act as a sort of built-in shin guard. It was a disaster. After flying to California to have two friends with day jobs in the ER install the long, thin tubes of armor on both shins, his legs swelled up so much that his stitches burst, exposing the implant. Every time he stood up, his body was hit with a rush of sharp, tingling pain. One night, in a feat of grisly bravery, he braced for the worst and just yanked the implants out himself. Okay, whoo! I'm going to stop right there. Obviously, this guy experiments the shit, with himself. Just saying, before we even get into more about the Lovetron 9000, which is kind of the centerpiece of this in many ways, I have tons of respect for people that are willing to go through with this. I mean, that people are willing to constantly experiment and really push forward with, something that I think is definitely going to happen. I've talked about this on Patreon. I've talked about this on Sovereign Tech Prime for years, that, I really think we're heading for the sprawl. We are, that post, not dystopian, but post-apocalyptic, as in a apocalypse occurs. I just don't ever see that happening. Just no way. We're really heading more towards where technology just is more and more pervasive, and the sprawl is what gets talked about by William Gibson, in his sprawl trilogy, Neuromancer, all those different books. So I really think we're heading towards that, and good or bad, that's kind of up to you. I think that we've covered. I think it was in episode 200. Or maybe it was episode 199B or something like that, where we covered that video from the Pentagon, where they also recognized that, look, technology is going to be so pervasive that people are going to start slipping through the cracks of this technology. It's going to create this very odd disparity in social structure. And that leaked training video from the Pentagon, I think that hits it, is that there's benefits to be had from heading towards the sprawl, even though I'm more... Honestly, I like living out in the sticks. Don't confuse me. I was born in the city, grew up in the city, New York City. But I don't want that life for anything. I just don't. It doesn't appeal to me at all. So I'm more, definitely want to be living in nature, but that doesn't mean that the world isn't heading towards the sprawl, right? So anyway, people that are, really experimenting with this, getting in on it early, and since they're doing it themselves and there's not necessarily a ton of corporate interest involved, that bodes well for everybody else, because it really allows for the real change. Because you can just mimic what he did. You can mimic what Rich Lee is doing, and that is by its very nature open source, which means that it doesn't get controlled by other people. Okay, so that's where I'm okay with a lot of transhumanist ideas, because this is transhumanism. It's cyborg more particularly, but it is effectively, this is a path to transhumanism. And in the article, Rich Lee even talks about how he replaced God with transhumanism. So he's very excited about that, and he's trying to bring it into reality, at least for himself. And of course, he does want to sell it to other people. But I don't mind transhumanism when it's open source. When we know that we have, we being saying the populace has actual control, or that the individual has actual control over what exactly they're implanting and what exactly they're using in all this. And so when this stuff's getting done all homebrew by these grinders, as they're called, you got to wonder about those terms sometimes. Sometimes these news organizations just make that bullshit up. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty cool, that they're doing this sort of thing. So I'm going to read on a little bit more, and then we're going to talk about it. Still, he was not deterred. Some might view Lee's body modification avocation as self-mutilation, but he sees it as self-improvement. Quote, "Someday I'd like to live in a world where everything you're dealt is changeable, fluid," end quote, Lee told me. Quote, "My conception of an ideal self is something like a Mr. Potato Head, where I can just swap in and out different prosthetics for different senses and abilities," end quote. Now, I'll comment on that quickly, Stallion breaking it, before we get into the Lovetron 9000. So Rich Lee talks about it later on in the article, and the article can be found in the show notes for episode 213 for this episode. And like he says that it needs to be replaceable and removable, like that's kind of one of his goals. And as long as that's the reality, as long as it's always something like that your body doesn't suddenly start to depend upon, again, I think it's okay. Like I don't have a problem with this kind of, as he puts it, self-improvement. And I think it really is. Me personally, my opinion, and I would not stop anybody from doing differently. I am not, like, there's some parts of this that I'm interested in, but like kind of a lot of the interchanging of so many parts and everything, that part does not appeal to me. Like, I love my body way too much. And I'm not saying that you don't love your body if you want to switch out. I'm just saying that like, I love what I have so much that I don't want a different arm. I don't want, I don't want any of that. Okay. There's add-ons that I'm intrigued by, or maybe what will end up being called human extensions of sorts, kind of like we'd be upgrading ourselves like web browsers to where we have these things, kind of running off to the side. I'm intrigued by those. But as far as like being able to constantly replace shit, it doesn't really appeal to me. Let's read on a little bit more. The Lovetron 9000 is Lee's riskiest and most ambitious project yet. Documenting his modifications on YouTube has turned Lee into a celebrity of sorts within the grinder community. Even among those that count having bits of electronics implanted in their body as fun, Lee's excursions veer toward the extreme. But he is betting that that won't be the case forever. He foresees a world not too far in the future where the average person has implants that do everything from unlock their front door to, yes, improve their sex life. So effectively, and he doesn't have regulatory approval yet for any of this, but the Lovetron 9000, I'm just going to skip ahead here. The Lovetron 9000 is this little motor so you cut the skin just above the penis, okay? And it talks about all this in the article. You cut the skin just above the penis, and you insert in that this little motor that will, when you want to activate it, and there's obviously the ways you want to activate it could be myriad. I mean, like there's so many different ways you could do it. It will start causing your penis to vibrate. Okay, and then there's like advanced forms of it where, you could be inserting magnets and all this different shit can happen. But your penis does effectively turn into a vibrator. Now, myself, I'm totally on board with this. Like I said, in fact, earlier in the article, or later on in the article, Rich Lee says that these things need to be removable and, shouldn't really be permanent. Like he breaks down into that. And as long as that's the case, I'm totally on board with this. As long as with a little bit of surgery, I can get this removed or whatever, fucking great. Then why not try it out? And they're saying it's risky because, well, especially when you get into the magnets, a whole lot of things can go wrong in the penis. And in those cases, like, I'll admit it, and this is why I respect people like Rich Lee, because they're willing, to test this shit out. Because, look, I'm just saying, and I know this is typical for a guy to talk about his dick, okay? But I've said this many, many times. It's the same reason that I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke, I don't do a bunch of drugs, is because I don't want anything, again, whiskey dick, stoner boner, and what cigarettes do, like, with contracting blood vessels and all that in the penis. Like, I have just no interest in ever messing with my dick like that, right? But this is an enhancement. This isn't like a detractor, okay? All those things take away from, shall we say, my sexual prowess. And, I won't endanger that for a second. Now, this is potentially dangerous, and that's why I'd love for other people to, kind of test it out first. But once it's pretty well set, I mean, shit, I'm game. Like, hook me up, especially since it's removable. And since it's removable, I can't imagine any of the damage, even if damage did occur, that it would necessarily be permanent. I am so on board with this. I think this is so cool, and I'm sure a lot of other people would find it so hot. I mean, to just be able to, and how long does the battery last? I mean, there's a bunch of different things you have to consider. Oh, could the battery explode, from shit getting too hot? I mean, there's huge questions to be asked about it. But in the abstract, I fucking love the idea, especially since, it's a relatively simple procedure. I get the risk right now and the danger, but it is a relatively simple procedure to do. Now, what's a little more interesting about this, and you can share your thoughts with me if you want to email in, and let me know what you think about it. But I mean, why wouldn't you? You get, you get to please say, either, maybe a man, if you're into that, or you get to please women all the more. Oh, please. Please. And probably the whole procedure would probably cost as much as, people spend in dildos, or particularly vibrators, over time. But I could really see this happening. Now, here's where the interesting point kind of comes up. And this is actually a really long article because it gets somewhat into Rich Lee's personal life. And not that I want that to speak about the technology necessarily. But Rich Lee went through a divorce, and the fact that he is now working on the Lovetron 9000, that he is looking into turning his penis into a human vibrator, which I think is a wonderful thing. He is losing custody of his, or visiting rights and custody to his children out of the divorce, his 2 children, because his wife thinks that this is absolutely sick and that his kids should not be experiencing this. How much you want to bet that if, say, Rich Lee's, and this is kind of unfair because she's not here to defend herself, of course, but how much do you want to bet that if Rich Lee's wife was married to somebody in the military, that oh no, that she wouldn't have any problem with that. Her kids could experience that person the whole time. Somebody who, especially say if the person was infantry or operating drones or whatever. This is the world we live in. This is such bullshit. I get it that if parents as stewards, want not shield, but just want to ensure that, say a kid is kind of getting the best out of life and all this stuff. But I bet she has no problem with exposing her children to violence. And boy, that just ticks me the fuck off. This guy, I mean, yeah, I mean, do I want my kids, if I had kids, would I want my kids seeing me, doing surgery on myself, on my own penis and all this stuff? No, of course not. I wouldn't want that sort of thing, to be going on. But yeah, it something about that just feels so off to me. How really, I mean, it really just speaks to how anti-sex our culture still is. And that is that's something that Sovryn has been combating for years. To use an unfortunate term. So anyway, I think a lot of people are excited about this. I think it's a very, very interesting technology. I would do it. I'm all for, my penis becoming a human vibrator. Fucking rock on. or rock hard. Anyway. This stuff's happening. I'm excited that this kind of stuff is happening. And as long as they have the ethos that this stuff's reversible, you can remove it and all of that, I say experiment away. Rock and roll. Anyway, we'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. Woo, baby. And I got to tell you, something I'm really excited about. Maybe you want to experiment a little bit if you haven't, but get your hands on some precious metals. And I don't think you're really rolling the dice. This is stuff that holds value better than almost anything on the planet. Gold, silver, platinum, palladium, whatever ones you want to get. And where I want you to get them from is Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, they've been in business for decades. They are the real deal. Believe me, they are going to hook you up. And you can use, you want to get into some crypto, you can use Bitcoin to get your hands on some of that gold and silver. It's a great way to diversify your wealth and even do a little play action here and there. And they'll even buy precious metals from you. So I want you to go, Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, go to gold.zog.ninja. That's the website, gold.zog.ninja. That'll take you right there. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you when you go to buy them. They've got what you want, believe me, and they ship fast, just one of the best businesses in the world, and we thank them for supporting Sovryn Tech. Woo! And we're already back. Anyway, enough of the fun stuff with human vibrators. I love it. Like, I really, really want that to become a thing. Like, I wish Rich Lee all the success in the world with developing that. I wish it didn't affect his personal life, in any way, shape, or form. But no, I don't want to harp on that. It's like, you do realize that, like, sex workers have kids too, often enough, and they usually treat their kids very well. Conservatism drives me nuts. Anyway, all right. Well, speaking of conservatism driving me nuts, not that this is necessarily directly related to conservatism, because I know plenty of conservatives that don't support this bullshit that's going on. But we have a bit of an update as to a couple episodes ago. I think it was episode 211, where it was titled "Internet Self-Defense," and in that we were talking about how there was a story when the immigration ban from the Trump administration first got laid down. There was a story that was posted by The Independent. No one else shared the story. No one else was talking about it. And that's, we're bringing up that, look, we want to verify sources. It's a little bit of an issue when only one source is actually talking about this. Did it actually happen? And then when the links within that source weren't linking to actual times where it did occur, but there was the story that supposedly, Border Patrol agents were, what is CPB, right? Were checking, social media of people that were being detained from the immigration ban. And there was even the possibility that they were looking at passwords, or they were asking for passwords. Now, we talked about it, and in that, we mentioned that, well, this is actually, as far as looking at, incoming people, from whatever country, we were talking about how that it was originally set up by the Obama administration, like in mid-2016. In mid-2016, though, as was understood of the potential for this to happen, and the bill that it was attached to and all this, was that not that you had to hand over your password for your social media account, but you just had to hand over, like, your credentials, saying that, okay, yes, that's me, that this is me on Facebook, this is me on Twitter, or whatever. But the story from The Independent that we were talking about in episode 211, was kind of hinting at, well, but they're actually, they may have been being asked to hand over passwords and all this. And there wasn't any evidence for either that any of that was occurring. So I said, look, you want to be really careful about this because you don't have any evidence. And even within the Independent article, where it was linking to situations where supposedly border patrols were accessing social media or were asking for your passwords to social media, like the article that they were linking to had nothing to do with that. And so the whole story was, very, very suspect. Now we have a proven case to where this actually did happen. Now we only have one. We don't have any others, and there's none others linked into this. And what's a little more interesting, and why I think everything that was said in episode 211 is still perfectly valid, is that what happened in this specific case had nothing to do with the 7 countries that are part of the immigration ban. So the 7 countries, just so you know, we may detain people, we're going to do enhanced pat downs, all this different stuff that are a part of this immigration ban laid out by the Trump administration. They are, let's see, there's Iraq, Syria, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Those are the 7 countries, okay? Now, again, we have no evidence whatsoever that the people that came, we don't have hard evidence, I should say. I mean, there's a lot of hearsay, and there's certain legal organizations that are saying they got calls that it happened and all this, but we don't really have we don't have as much hard evidence about those. So as far as any of those countries go, that's just not a part of the, that's not a part of what we're talking about here. However, a U.S.-born NASA scientist. Now, there is an importance. I mean, again, I'm an anarchist. I don't give a shit. I don't hold people that have government jobs in any kind of high praise or anything like that. Okay, but there is an importance to this person being a NASA scientist. The U.S.-born citizen, NASA scientist, coming back from Chile after touring South America a bit. Again, none of those 7 countries are in South America, in case you didn't know. But who was touring, he was coming back from Chile at this point, had not been to any of those countries, at least in years, if not ever, has worked at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, for 10 years. For the past 10 years, this guy has worked there. His name is Sid Bakanavar. And it all went down. It was January 30th. He was going through, U.S. Customs, Border Patrol, CBP, right? And he was told, you need to give us your access pin to your phone. You need to hand over your passwords for your social media. And we're going to take your phone away. And they took his phone away for at least 30 minutes, if not longer. But he got the full shakedown that was supposedly a part of the immigration ban, not coming from any of those countries. He was coming from Chile. And to this day, he doesn't know what exactly happened. He doesn't know what they accessed, what they looked at. He tried to put up Sid Bakanavar. There's links in the show notes where you can read everything about this, okay? He doesn't know what exactly went down, what did these, what did CBP, end up doing with his phone and everything. He got it back, but what did they look at? And his case, when he was he didn't want to seem non-compliant because, yeah, it's a good bet he could get shot. That seems to be how serious all this bullshit is, okay? But he made the case saying, look, I don't think you're qualified to be looking at exactly, or, he's saying, this is really sensitive information. And I mean, his point being is that you people aren't qualified, because if you were qualified, you'd work at NASA, or you certainly wouldn't be a Border Patrol agent, okay? To be looking at all of the stuff on my company phone. This is a phone given to him by NASA, okay? So we're talking about top secret shit being on this phone, right? I mean, and he just has to hand it over to whoever claims that they are, that they're with Border Patrol or something like this, or that, they're with Customs and all. I mean, this is if I were, again, I'm an anarchist, but if I were a government person, I would be flipping the fuck out. I would be saying, what do you mean you're going to go looking through my NASA scientist's phone? You don't understand what's on there. What if you accidentally hit delete on something that is just ridiculously important or time sensitive? What happened? I mean, there's a reason that you don't, even at NASA, there's a reason you don't let certain people into the fucking control room because they could have, hurt something, they could affect something, they could damage something. Who the hell knows what could happen? Who knows whose lives are on the line? But Border Patrol thinks, oh shit, no, you let us look at your phone, buddy. Maybe because you have a funny last name like Bakanavar, which I don't think is funny, but whatever. So this is happening. And then, so we have one case of it. Again, though, it's an unrelated case. It is not related to anybody or to anyone, say, because again, Sid Bakanavar is a U.S.-born citizen. Okay? He was not coming from one of the 7 countries that were part of the immigration ban. This was happening completely outside of it. But it happened. Then we get, new Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly speaking before Congress on February 7th, 2017, saying that, quote, this direct quote, we want to get on their social media with passwords. He's talking about The people that are affected by the immigration ban, which, by the way, Sid Bikanovar by no means is affected by that. U.S.-born citizen, works in the U.S., has worked at JPL for 10 years. And he was coming from South America. Read it again. Again, this is in reference to people from the immigration ban. We want to get on their social media with passwords. What do you do? What do you say? If they don't want to cooperate, then you don't come in. Direct quote from John Kelly, Homeland Security Secretary, put there by Trump. So now, is this like an odd thing? No, not really. We've talked about it in Britain. They do this, right, with RIPA. That was the legislation that passed that says, be it with your smartphone, laptop, whatever, if you fly into Heathrow, no matter where you're coming from, who you are, you have to hand over your password. And we talked about how, I'm a little conspiratorial on that because it's interesting that the bulk of the ways that people end up going to Europe is, at least from, North America, is through Heathrow. And so it's ironic that, Britain can get a look at anything they want because they have this, no other country really has that kind of setup in Europe proper. So it's fascinating that all the cheap flights, or not all, there's Iceland, I get it. But a lot of these, a lot of flights, you have to end up going through Heathrow where they are going to check you out, or where they can check you out, thanks to the legislation known as RIPA. Now, other countries, Britain's not the only one. Turkey does this as well. There are other countries in the Middle East, and even to some degree Eastern Europe, that will ask you for, okay, no, we want to see your social media. We want to get a look at this. So while John Kelly, though, granted, let's be clear here that, the Trump administration is implementing policies, and yes, it started off with Obama, but like I said, under Obama, it wasn't clear that they were going to ask for your passwords. They just wanted to see your credentials. They just wanted to look at your Facebook page and see what you're saying and all this stuff. John Kelly is making it clear, no, we're going to go after passwords now. Okay, so this is somewhat unique to Trump. Now, again, the interesting thing here is that this happened, this policy was clearly enacted, in fact, before John Kelly was before Congress, making the claim, to somebody that exists outside of all of the requirements, to get detained. So this is going to happen to anybody. This can happen to anybody. And that's the bottom line really to bring up here, is that no matter who you are, no matter what country you're coming from, doesn't matter if you work for the fucking government. You can work top secret, baby, for NASA. You are going to get the shakedown. Or you can potentially get the shakedown. There's no apologies being made for any of this. They go right along, which, isn't a shock, because if the president never apologizes for fucking shit, why would anybody under him apologize? So now there's been some great articles that have come out about this, which, in fact, there's one from Free Code Camp that was, in fact, titled by Quincy Larson, "I'll never bring my phone on an international flight again. Neither should you." I'll link to it in the show notes. It's a good article. It's talking about, it goes into what happened with Sid Bikanovar, and it talks about what to do, how to handle the situation. Pretty much, Quincy's saying, don't bring a phone at all. Just go over there, and if you have to with your laptop, wipe your laptop before you cross the border. This is all stuff we've talked about on Sovryn Tech for years, by the way. But, wipe your laptop, and then when you get back over there, log back into your laptop, and then all your settings will come right back, and then rinse and repeat as you're crossing various borders. Because, again, it doesn't matter what country you're going to. It doesn't fucking matter. They'll do it to anybody, anywhere, anytime, even if you yourself are a government goon. Not to say that a NASA scientist is necessarily a government goon. Sometimes if you want to work in science, you can't help but work for the government. It's true. So there's some interesting, ideas to be laid out in this. He talks about buying a burner phone when you end up at the other airport, at your destination, which they do sell these, okay, to where when you go there, you can buy the phone and, They're already preset with like minutes and text and all this different stuff, and you can use it to make international calls as needed, or to get around and everything. And just end up using those, but never ever take your actual smartphone, your daily driver, effectively with you when you're crossing the border. And that's not bad advice. I think all of that's fine advice. My personal, and this is something I've talked about for many years with the Dark Android project. I've recommended not, if you want any kind of actual like anonymity, privacy, and security, you don't use a smartphone at all for any of that. You use a tablet. You use an Android tablet. Particularly, I've recommended for years the Nexus 7, the 2013 model with just Wi-Fi. You don't want LTE. You don't want a SIM card in it anyway. And so what you could do is, this is my recommendation for what to do when you're crossing the border and you don't want to end up like Sid Bikanovar, okay? Because now we know it's happening. Again, it's not happening in the way that the Independent was talking about. I mean, it is happening, but you get my point, is that this is an interesting case and really makes it far worse than what was being laid out as far as the immigration ban goes. So you take an Android tablet, and Android tablets, ever since like version 5.0, or like Android 5.0, it has, and maybe even before, it has the ability to have multiple, and this is only on tablets, not on phones, to have multiple user accounts. And each one is, more or less encrypted on its own. Okay, so what my recommendation is that, because you don't want to go to another country and not have like maps, and not have all these different things. And you can install Signal on a tablet as long as you have it on a smartphone somewhere where it can do the key exchange with the text. You can put it on a tablet, and then you could use it as long as you're connected to Wi-Fi. So, and when you go to other countries, generally there's some form of Wi-Fi there that you can hook up with. But anyway, so have 2 user accounts, at least 2. You can have 5, I don't care. Okay, but at least 2. One of them, have it be you. Have it be your name, your picture, all that shit, right? And just have practically nothing there. That way when they ask you for your PIN, you give them the PIN, and they find nothing. Don't have Facebook on there. Don't have Twitter. Don't have any of that shit. Okay? And maybe you'll want to do what we talked about in episode 211 of Sovryn Tech, where you're being very careful or even wiping your social media history, which I explained how to do that, and there are links in the show notes for episode 211 about how to do that. If you're, depending on the level of concern you have about this, if you don't care, you don't care. Okay? But I'm just giving you the tools. It's your choice whether or not you want to use them. So you put nothing in that other one, just scant, just to make it maybe enough to just make it look good. Then the other user account that you want on there, have it be like a picture of some old lady, and have it have like a name like Mildred or something. I don't know. Just something odd. And tell them, like when they ask you, oh, hey, can we log into this other account? Say, no, sometimes I share my tablet with my grandmother or my mother or my friend, whatever story you want to make up. Okay, and that's hers. I don't have her password. I don't mess with that. There you go. But underneath Mildred's account, not yours, Mildred's, that's where you can have offline maps installed, you can have Signal installed, you can have all these different apps installed, you can have all the shit on there, okay, that that makes it very usable for you when you go to another country. And and you can install like Here Maps, that they have offline maps for the entire world. Totally for free. And that way you can still use GPS, because your tablet would still have GPS and all this. And that's how I would do it, is I would use an Android tablet as your go-to device with a fake account on it when you're crossing borders. And just tell them, yeah, that's somebody else's account, and this is who I share it with. I don't have access to that. And if they end up taking your tablet, well, there it goes. But that, personally, for me, I think that's kind of the smartest thing to do, in these situations. But let's be clear here. Let's understand that, yeah, your digital life is absolutely being looked at. You are going to have to hand over your passwords at any given moment. And I think that shit too, because then how about, why doesn't the NSA or the U.S. government, you just give us the passwords? Okay, U.S. government, because if we just have to hand them over to you at any given moment, you might as well make them up. It's such crap. I can't believe there's people, I was posting this on social media, there was people actually defending it. It's like, what are you doing? Like, if there is any real world situation where, by someone that's supposed to not be a criminal, the government, of course, they are criminals, okay, but by someone that's not supposed to be, where I have to hand over my password? What's the point to the password? Who am I securing it from? I mean, the government's the person you're really supposed to be securing shit from. Even if you believe government's a good thing, most people, or at least they used to, think that that was the deal. It's like, yeah, well, I don't want to give it to the government. You know, my info and whatever else. I mean, there's a reason it's been a trope for decades that when a cop comes up to your door, you ask for a warrant. Everybody knows that. Why? Because you don't automatically just want to, let these people run roughshod. And it's the same thing with passwords. It's unbelievable that people are okay with this. And we already have the case. You already see where, it's just for those 7 countries. It's just for the Muslims, those evil Muslims, which I don't think they are. And I've been to the Middle East. Fuck you. I know. No. It'll be done to NASA scientists. It'll be done to government workers. It'll be done to everybody, no matter what country you're coming from. This is always the truth. With any time you hand people power, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And they just took a mile. And I was impressed. I saw some pretty big names saying, is everybody angry yet about this? Because of what happened with Sid Bukanovar. Damn right it's worth getting angry about. And it's time to start doing it in some best practices when you're traveling abroad. My recommendation. We'll be back with more. Woo, baby. I want to tell you, speaking of a great way to secure things, of course, a great way to secure things is to use cryptocurrencies. Get in on all the crypto, baby. And a great way to use cryptocurrencies and to jump on that is to go to cryptocompare.com. Cryptocompare.com, this is a website I keep this tab open 24/7 because I get to check on all the prices. I get all the reviews on all the new wallets. I get to get social with everything. I love it. CryptoCompare.com, they've been a long-time sponsor of Sovryn Tech. I cannot thank them enough. I'm glad that they appreciate the message that we put out there. This is the place to go for all of your information about what's happening in the cryptocurrency space and just to keep up to date on all of it. You want to go to CryptoCompare.com. And once again, I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to that show, baby, and get your hands on those cryptocurrencies. Like now. If you didn't before, do it now.
Internet of Targets.
It is time for Internet of Targets, where we talk about the Internet of Things. Probably the worst new market category to come along in, 100 years. It is so bad. For everything we've already talked about in this episode, if you don't get it now, it's there. It's so bad. So the Internet of Things, well, one of the first places that Internet of Things is really, kind of taking over and is becoming actually sort of a central hub for the Internet of Things, in particular, like how Samsung is baking in SmartThings, which is an Internet of Things hub device, right into their televisions now and all this. So the television really for so long has been effectively, it's been a technological battleground, to put it in very unfortunate terms. But a certain lawsuit from Vizio has finally, come to conclusion it was about a couple of years ago. And, anyway, I'm going to go to some audio here so that you can hear about the story, and then we're going to break right into it. So let's go.
Vizio and the FTC have reached a settlement on those TVs that would watch you back. The TV company has agreed to pay $2.2 million to settle charges the FTC made against them for collecting consumer information without user consent. So what actually went down? Software in Vizio's TVs could collect second-by-second data of what you were watching. Vizio could then share this very detailed, very valuable information with advertisers. The feature was used to collect data from 11 million TVs. The problem was it did so without user consent. The FTC in New Jersey said that this practice violated consumer protection laws, and they took Vizio to court for the data tracking software. A court order also says it must obtain permission before any data is collected in future. As part of the settlement, Vizio will also delete all data collected before March 1st, 2016. The practice was similar to programs we've seen from both Samsung and LG in the past, So hopefully this settlement will set new standards for consumer protection in the future. I'm Luke Lancaster, and for more up-to-the-minute tech news, check out cnet.com.
Now, I wouldn't count on best practices. I wouldn't count on pro-consumer attitudes from LG or Samsung or even Vizio out of any of this. So, as you gleaned, I mean, this is not that this is a new discovery. It's just that the lawsuit finally came to an end, and pretty much the feds said, Vizio, you have to delete all of this data from before March 1st, 2016. You were in the wrong for doing this, and yay, the government protects us. But of course, as we were just talking about in the last segment, the government doesn't protect you from shit. Give us your passwords. We want to look at everything. So maybe they were just mad that Vizio wasn't handing over the data. But here's the thing, is that, and it's true, I'm glad they brought up that Samsung had done the same thing. In fact, we covered this story. This was back in February, almost a year to the day, which is interesting, of 2015. I think it was like February 9th or something like that, where there was the big, where Samsung came out, not that they were in the middle of a legal case, but they came out and warned people saying, you might not want to discuss sensitive information in front of your smart TV. In front of one of our Samsung TVs. Because they're saying that, yeah, guess what? This thing's always listening. And, well, you see what happens with Vizio. You heard the amount of information that was being collected. I mean, it's not just what you say. I mean, like viewing habits, all the stuff. And it all got sold off to advertisers. Now, there's 2 points really to bring up with this entire story. Okay? I mean, yes, was the government right in saying that this was wrong of them to do? In my opinion, absolutely. Okay? But, a broken clock is right twice a day, too. And the government is, if anything, a broken fucking clock. But the 2 points I want to bring up is, one is that Vizio is a popular brand. Okay, you probably see them in Walmart, you see them in all these other ones because they're a budget brand. They sell things, I remember I had a Vizio, it was a plasma television. It was one of the first plasma televisions. Of course, this is years ago. Plasma TVs aren't even a thing anymore. Okay, and I had a sound bar from them too because I was like, holy shit, what a great price. I'll grab it, because it wasn't thousands of dollars like all the others were effectively. And the thing is that I bring this up all the time because we talk about how, oh, wow, isn't it, you hear so many people saying, isn't it amazing that, oh, you can get a computer for $200. Oh, you can get a TV for this much. Oh, you can get it for this much, blah, blah, blah. Understand, all of this technology that is at that lower prices have not gone down that much. Not in reality. Okay, Vizio cannot sell you a 40 or 50, 60 inch, whatever, LCD TV or LED LCD TV, for $400. They can't. The TV is easily worth $1,000, or maybe a little less. I mean, prices do go down a little bit, sure, but not as far down as they go. They are able to do that because they put in ad tech or adware. They put in, or they make the money by collecting all that information about you, which they've been doing for years, and selling it off to advertisers, and that offsets the cost of what it takes to produce the device. Now, I'm not inherently saying that that's unethical. The really unethical part is that they don't inform you, in my opinion. That I think that's wrong. I think that's so anti-consumer. To not tell you. Okay? I mean, but bottom line being is that, understand, the world is not getting that much better. Not everything's getting cheaper. Everything's just getting sold off to who knows. And it's probably not just advertisers. Maybe it got sold off to, some foreign government. Maybe, who knows where a lot of this stuff is getting sold off to exactly. And it's all getting collected, and you had no idea. Or maybe you knew about it. And if you don't care, well, then you don't care. Personally, I so disagree. If you're the kind of person, I've mentioned this many times. If you're the kind of person, okay, that cares about being tracked, that cares about your privacy and all of this, you have to understand that targeted ads, which is what your positive claim would be, is that, well, this is just going to help serve me better ads by them, knowing my viewing habits and all this stuff, right? Targeted ads are the premier way for intelligence organizations to track you, know you, understand you, follow you, and maybe even, take it a step further, control you. Targeted ads are the worst fucking thing. It's one of the ultimate tools of the government. Believe me. Go ahead. Go ask some other hackers while you're. I'm not claiming I'm not claiming or denying to be one. I'm just saying, go ask some hackers about targeted ads, and they'll tell you the same goddamn thing. That these targeted ads are so precise. They're so good at saying so much about you, and they can follow you and they track you. I mean, and it gets bad. Like with Windows 10, we were talking about Windows 10 earlier. One of the things when you install Windows 10, the one switch that I just beg people to turn off is that Microsoft creates an advertising ID of you. You can turn it off when you go through the installation, but otherwise everything that happens on your computer on Windows 10 gets attached to an advertising ID. Might Microsoft do it anyway? Yeah, maybe. Okay, but at least you can say, no, motherfucker, I turned that off. You don't get to access me like that. At least you have you took the action, right? Because you were knowledgeable about it. But this is what these companies are doing. I mean, this is how all these people are making money. Is through ad tech. And the problem there is that a lot of this collection, even and this had been proven true with Lenovo, not the ThinkPads. ThinkPads were fine. But there were the couple cases where you found out that the adware that was installed on their laptops, like their IdeaPads and some of their lower end ones, okay, which is they were able to be lower end because they were offset by the price of adding in all that adware from the advertisers, right? Okay, if you're running Windows on the machine, so let's be particular about that the certificates that adware used became a gigantic security exploit where literally your entire computer could get taken over. We talked about this. We were actually recommending boycotting Lenovo on Sovryn Tech because it was just so fucking egregious. Okay, this ad tech, it's not just about serving you better ads. It is a security exploit on your entire goddamn life. If you want to hand that kind of power over to people who in my opinion, are not fucking qualified, like Vizio, what are they a security company? Do they have a cybersecurity team? Are they hiring George Hotz? Probably not. This is one of the biggest problems with IoT. This is the second point, is that any of these companies that are starting to bake all this shit in, Samsung maybe not so much included, and at least they came out and said, hey, you might not want to talk in front of your TV. Not that I'm giving Samsung any fucking credit, okay? But none of these companies are hiring, their entire business is being in the budget realm. They don't have the money to hire the proper people to secure your data, to secure you. And to make it worse, you can't fucking buy it. Like I said, it's impossible to even buy a dumb TV anymore. The best thing you can do is like buy a monitor and you have to hook up a bunch of devices to it. It is near impossible to be able to do that. So yeah, this is happening. Vizio got caught in the act. This is probably happening, willy-nilly with a bunch of other companies. I don't expect them to act any better about it. And the only solution is obviously don't have a fucking TV. Right? Or at least, I don't know, somehow find a dumb TV. Or hell, go start a company that makes these things and charge the premium. I'd pay for it.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Tech history.
It is time for Tech History, where we break into the history of tech. And this one's definitely going to be a little heavier emphasis on the history. And I'm going to have some fun with this one. Enough of the serious shit. I want to have a good time with this episode. And I'm going to tell you a little story. And this story goes back to, at least 1938, and goes forward a few years from that, and then maybe right into the present. So this is, and let me be clear here, that this is loaded with speculation, as well as, some things that, there is scant evidence for. But then there's some things that there is evidence for. And there are some things that don't make a whole ton of sense. So, but I want to caveat this entire segment with all of that. Okay, so don't go around thinking, the Golden Stallion believes this. I'm not saying that at all. I am presenting a story before you, nothing more. And to open it up, let's go right to some audio, shall we?
Hi, this is Emma, and welcome to Esoteric Detective. Recently I was doing some research and came across a strange picture from Google Earth located in the barren wastelands of Antarctica. The location will be placed in the description. The opening of the mouth of the cave has been reported to be about 30 meters or about 100 feet, which makes the opening massive. Some researcher had put forward the opinion that this is evidence of some kind of structure. You can see the shape of something that appears to be some kind of door or maybe even a craft that had crashed. Some others have speculated that this is in fact an abandoned Nazi base. It is known that in the 1930s the Nazis sent forces to the Arctic in order to build a base. According to internal Russian documents which came to light in 2006, the major 1947 U.S. military expedition named Operation High Jump was not sent to set up a research station, but in fact was sent to search for such Nazi bases. Researchers citing the massive scale of the operation, which involved aircraft carriers, squadrons of planes and thousands of men, as far too large to set up any research station, and that such a force would only be sent if it was expecting to be engaged in heavy combat. However, if the mission was sent to find a Nazi base or not, nothing has been admitted publicly. Whatever the case, Nazi base or UFO crash, you can clearly see it looks like some kind of artificial structure. You can see on the metal door large round forms that look like rivets. What do you guys think? Do you think it is a base of some kind, or this something else, maybe a craft, or maybe even a crashed UFO? Or do you think it was a more mundane reason, such as some anomalous natural formation?
Okay, so a lot to unpack there, and you probably didn't see any of that coming. That is from a YouTube video. I did not make that audio. Obviously done with voice software, not terrible, or text-to-speech software. But anyway, so there is a theory that in the some of this is theory, some isn't. Okay, but the overarching theory is this: is that the Nazis back in at least the late 30s or the 40s built a base on Antarctica. Now, let's get into some of the reality of all this. And something she's talking, that the voice was talking about in that audio, was that on Google Maps, someone found effectively what looks like a gigantic door. Now, I'm going to put a picture of this as the cover art for this episode. And the coordinates for this supposed door, I will also leave in the show notes if you want to, if you want to look it up yourself, kind of have fun with that. But it is apparently judging by Google Maps, the legend of Google Maps, that being like, how big is something, right? That's not the legend. Whatever. Anyway, judging on Google Maps, it is at least 80 by 80. Like, it is a massive structure, whatever the fuck it is. Okay, now there's a bunch of stories that go on around about Antarctica. We've talked about them even on Sex and Science Hour, where there are supposedly pyramids in Antarctica that are obviously covered by snow and ice right now, but that they are actually, they are artificial. They're not a natural formation. A lot of this stuff goes around. But to get into the reality of did the Nazis actually even go to Antarctica? Yes. From like December 38 to sometime in 1939, there really were, exploratory expeditions to Antarctica, particularly the western part of Queen Maud Land. So the thing is, though, is that the story gets overblown to where, there was this gigantic Nazi fleet that went down there, when really it was just one ship. In fact, particularly we know the name of it. It's the Schwabenland. And it was more or less just trying to scout out some new territory, supposedly. And here's where, I'm not so buying into the official story. But supposedly it was to look into the German whaling industry. And I don't really see, the need for all of that. But the Schwabenland, apparently had a fairly small crew. Granted, a whaling expedition would be just about exactly what I would say if I was trying to do, something a little more exploratory, not for a whaling expedition, but for what exactly is in or on Antarctica, or can we take advantage of this for the war effort and the furtherance of the Third Reich? Like that. Yeah, that's about what I would say. So, but it's true that yes, the Nazis absolutely did go to Antarctica. They particularly landed in Queensland. Is that really close to where this door is? Not necessarily. But so, all right, so you have that. Now, quite a bit more builds onto this. Okay, because it's not just like, the Nazis went there, so they must have been doing something military-oriented. They must have been building a base, despite the official story of the whaling industry. Okay, if that's all there was, I think a lot of people would write it off. However, a couple of very interesting things occur after, and still within the 1940s. Okay, but even after supposedly, World War II was over. But a couple of interesting things happen within Antarctica that are seemingly more directly military actions. One of them, particularly, the other is a little bit questionable. One is Operation Tabarin by the British government. And Operation Tabarin, this was in the summer of 1945. Okay, so understand, Hitler was long dead. All right, and the World War II was over. Okay. And supposedly the SAS went there, that's effectively, right, British Special Forces, which, interestingly enough, this is what also, so, all right, sorry, let me break this in. So the story is that the British sent down a military fleet to go and try and defeat the Nazis, that have set up this supposed special base, okay, in Antarctica. Now, the problem is that the claim, and most of the evidence says it was the SAS that did it. Problem is the SAS didn't exist in 1945. They wouldn't come back until years later. They had been disbanded after World War II. Okay, so we have that issue. Now, could you say that, well, it was a Black Ops SAS? Well, maybe, but the evidence points at it that it's not Black Ops, that it was absolutely so. But Operation Tabarin was a real thing. The thing is that at the time, yes, Britain was setting up various bases on islands relatively closely connected to Antarctica. That includes, lower parts of South America, and elsewhere. There's nothing really crazy about that. But, and even on those islands where they were setting up, various, you wouldn't even want to call them bases, because like you had at Hope Bay, which was one of the places near Antarctica where the British government was setting up. You had 13 people there. That's not a force to take on, some kind of like massive Nazi base, secret base or something like this. So Operation Tabarin, a lot of people don't really point, a lot of people write that off. Even people that think that there's a Nazi base in Antarctica, they write that bit of story off because there's not enough that makes sense, as far as that goes. Now, where things do get interesting, though, comes from a U.S. military operation, between 1946 and 1947 in there, called Operation High Jump. And this is where it gets damned odd, because what you had was, it was Task Force 68, and it was 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. Okay, this was absolutely a military force designed to take on, or seemingly to take on something. Now, the claim is that Operation High Jump was a test. It was like a test of the military in extreme conditions. And, not uninterestingly, though I don't know how much I'll go into this, but the entire operation, the U.S. Navy operation, was led by Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, who, and that's a fact, but that's somebody that a lot of conspiracy theorists point at. And I don't necessarily mean conspiracy theorists in a pejorative. Please understand me, even though I think this one in particular is a little, or not the Nazi base, but what I'm about to mention is a little crazy. He gets pointed at as being the person that proved that the Earth is actually hollow. I'm not even going to go there. Okay, that gets on whole other levels of, in my opinion, crazy. Okay, but you did have this military force that was doing military operations, and a very sizable one, in Antarctica. Why? Was it just to do a test? The thing is that this is a huge, this is really a good, 13 ships. And understand, the Air Force wasn't the most common thing in the world. Sending 33 airplanes down, that's pretty serious. It's a couple squadrons. And then 4,700 soldiers? Obviously they weren't all infantry, but you get my point. That kind of sounds like an invasion force to me, especially for the 1940s. I'll admit that it's odd that happened, and I'll admit that I'm highly skeptical that a force that size was sent just to do, just for testing, for wargaming, effectively. That is awfully odd. So the question becomes, okay, yes, we do know that the Nazis, went to Antarctica, did exploratory expeditions in Antarctica, supposedly for the whaling industry. We do know that at least the U.S., maybe not Britain, but Britain was doing things down there, in the vicinity of Antarctica in that time frame. Okay, but a lot of it seems to be pretty small potatoes as far as taking on, a secret Nazi base. But we do have Operation High Jump from the U.S. Navy where, oh yeah, that looks like that's ready to take on something big. And then suddenly, in the past year or so, we end up with this odd door, or what's supposedly a door. Personally, I'm totally open to the fact that it's just some kind of odd-looking natural formation. I get it. It does look like a door. It looks like it has those rivets. It has all that stuff to it. But, well, there you have it. So, it's funny, too, because in a lot of fiction, this always gets brought up. The idea of, space Nazis, that there's Nazis on the moon. Or even in Hellboy, where actually World War II went to, 1948, and you just didn't know. Because from, 45, or from 44 to, to 48, it was actually, an esoteric spiritual war of some kind, right? Which, does that come from some kind of reality? Well, kinda, because, the U.S. government hired Aleister Crowley to fight the Nazis. They hired, I'm sorry, did I say the U.S. government? I meant the UK, the British government. The supernatural, kind of these, all of this weird, esoteric shit was definitely a part of World War II. Whether or not, it does anything in reality, of course, I would say no, I'm an atheist, obviously. But, yeah, people were buying into a lot of the spiritual warfare at the time. There seems to be plenty of evidence for that, and it wasn't just the Nazis. The British were in on it, too. So there are a lot of strange things, that come out of the 40s, in this way. As far as there being some kind of Nazi base, like I said, this stuff has been going on forever, that the Nazis never actually went away, that they've sort of always been here. People point at how Obamacare, the symbol for Obamacare, looked like, the eagle holding the ring, and inside the ring, of course, it wasn't a swastika in this case, but it ended up just being, kind of the Obama over the hill symbol, whatever. Or how certain things that Donald Trump has done, is using some degree of Nazi symbology. honestly, folks, to be clear, there are only so many symbols in the world, and eventually one of them is going to look like the other. There's not much you can do about it. And I know, I'm fully well aware of, the history of the swastika before the Third Reich, that it was a symbol of peace and blah, blah, blah. And, obviously then it got perverted. But, yeah, it's an odd thing. Just me, and, I was in the military. I have an idea. Granted, war was fought a lot differently in the 40s than it was when I was in, and I was in a war. But it's strange, that size fleet, ends up going. Now you'd send that kind of fleet to any fucking country. Today, it's practically nothing. It's almost order of the day. Frankly, that. Oh yeah, no, are you kidding me? There's 5,000, 5,000 servicemen in every country. U.S. servicemen in every country on the planet. That's not an odd statement anymore. But in the 40s, yep, that's. In my opinion, that's pretty fucking strange, because back then, not everybody kowtowed to America's little wishes. So, what do I think about it? What do I think is down there? Or do I ever think that the Nazis built a base in Antarctica? Frankly, the Nazis did so much crazy shit. When you read about Die Glocke and a lot of the, there's that great book, Secret Weapons of Nazi Germany. When you read about all the stuff they had planned, and you don't know to what degree they ever got some of the stuff off of the planning stages. You got people that theorize that they were developing space stations. All this wild shit. Some of which, Die Glocke seemed to really be worked on, and, that's the Bell, which some people claim is either a time-traveling ship or some kind of anti-gravity device, or, it all gets wild. But there's so much rooted in a lot of their... there's so much crazy that exists within the reality of what the Nazis were developing. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they built some kind of, Antarctic base. And then you get into the idea that, well, the Nazis ran off to South America to escape, from the Allies and everything. And I mean, South America is one of the easiest ways, to get to Antarctica. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had a base. I guess the next question becomes are there still Nazis around? Well, are there Nazis from the 40s still around? That's heavy conjecture, like to kind of make that, to sort of make that claim. Is there some evidence, perhaps? Yeah, there's some. There's some. But I wouldn't say that, and we do have modern Nazis, certainly. I mean, neo-Nazis in the 90s and, and even other Nazis today that I'd rather not even talk about. Sure, but that doesn't mean they're related to some, kind of Antarctic base. I mean, you even get into like the Vril. If you ever, was it Vril, The Coming Race? This is a book from the 19th century that talks about that there was this entire lizard race, effectively, that had this amazing technology, Vril technology as it was called, that lived in these caverns in Antarctica. And we know the Nazis were really big on this idea of the Vril, kind of the Thule Society, all this different, esotericism and everything. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a good amount of evidence to suggest at least that it's a possibility that the Nazis built a base in Antarctica. Do I think it's a UFO crash? Absolutely not. No. That door that they were talking about, is it a UFO crash? No. Fucking no. As I always say, I don't believe aliens have ever come into the solar system. It's just no, not aliens. Sorry. But Nazis? Anyway, that was just for fun. Just having a fun one with you there. So you can decide on your own. But I presented some of the evidence of where a lot of these theories come from. And I mean, the door certainly does look interesting. Who knows what's there? I mean, who knows? Yeah. I mean, just real quick, and I bring up this book a lot, but there's the book by Robert Argod called Out of Antarctica. And his claim is that maybe a lot of, maybe some aspects of life actually started in Antarctica, or it started in Africa, but then it might have went to Antarctica because at the time Antarctica wouldn't have been covered in ice. And we know that it wasn't always covered in ice due to the Turkish Piri Reis map from the 13th century. Okay. And so, in Robert Argod's book, I mean, it's a straightforward book. It's not some kind of ancient alien bullshit. Okay. Which that's bullshit. But it talks about, the Polynesians and everything, saying how they came from a land that ended up getting covered in white. Is that story of them leaving Antarctica after it was frozen over? Is there some, are there some kind of civilizations on Antarctica? Yeah. I mean, ancient civilizations that existed there at one point. I'm totally open to that. I'm very, very open to that notion. And yeah, I'm open to maybe that the Nazis built a base there. Do I think that that's still running or that they're in charge of it? If they did, probably not. I'll leave it at that. But anyway, like I said, just for fun, I thought I'd, lay out a little bit of tech history, maybe some theories you'd never heard before. But there you go. And well, one of these days, yeah, Antarctica's a little appealing. Anyway, I'll be back with more solid. Hey, did I tell you about Tatiana Coin earlier? I think I already told you about it. If you don't know, please, this is a campaign you want to be really jumping on. TatianaCoin.com. This is going to set all the artists free, baby. I want you to jump on this. Believe me, lots of fun. I know a lot of you already have. Get to it, TatianaCoin.com.
The climax.
It is time for the climax, where I get to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. And this is going to be kind of a shorter climax, but I do want to tell you about something that I've been really loving. And like I said, I could talk about a movie, TV show, comic books, whatever. I could talk about anything I wanted. And one thing I haven't done yet, and I watched it some time ago, actually really like the weekend it came out, I binged. Voltron Legendary Defender Season 2. Now, I'm a huge Voltron fan. I actually spent a good amount of time talking about the original Voltron a few years ago on Sovryn Tech. This is before Legendary Defender was a gleam in Netflix's eye. Which, by the way, I have a Netflix account now. I talked about that in the recent Patreon Q&A. You can find out all of the dastardly reasons why I did so. But anyway, Voltron Legendary Defender Season 2. And I'm trying to remember if I even reviewed Season 1. If I didn't, I feel terrible because this is fantastic. Of course, Voltron is the cartoon from the 80s that was really kind of totally rewritten from a couple other cartoons that were anime from Japan. But Voltron was the American version, and it was particularly, Beast Go Lion? Go Lion is That's great stuff. Way better than Voltron could ever dream of being. But anyway, Voltron, holds a certain appeal, I think, to people that grew up in the 80s and maybe even in the 90s. And Legendary Defender, man, they are just, they are taking the cake. Like, this is such a fun cartoon. And I think, young person, adult, whatever, this is literally one of those cartoons where it is, and it should be called anime itself. The animation's phenomenal. Done by the same team, like Avatar, Legend of Korra, and all that. Just top-notch stuff, and I love both of those too. But, I mean, so it really should be called anime. But what they are doing with kind of the Voltron lore, they really shook things up quite a bit. And so, spoiler alerts, folks, because I may drop something on this. But you're really getting that more. I feel like you're getting more of that. I don't know. You're really getting that intergalactic feel with this. I mean, you have Princess Allura, you have all this different stuff. The characters go through some very, very serious transitions. Earth is a little more important to it. The music is phenomenal. I love what they're doing with the music. The storyline to where King Zarkon, and here's where the spoilers come in, where King Zarkon, you find out like at the end of season 1, where King Zarkon was originally one of the Voltron Force. He actually controlled Black Lion. And how all these lions have new abilities that they can unlock and everything. I mean, the show is really growing with itself. You get to grow with the show. And the show just keeps on adding more and more lore. And there's such cool stuff in it. Like these bases that exist within artificial gravity wells. I mean, it sounds like stuff out of Kevin J. Anderson Star Wars novels or something. But it really works in this. The dialogue's good. Some of the humor, it's a little childish, but some of the humor is genuinely really fucking funny. I don't know. I've been summarily impressed, and with the way that they've also been able to explore kind of the galaxy more. Like you're able to. That was always kind of the funny thing, was that, I mean, you understand why, because they were just, in the 80s in America, they were just transferring it over from a really violent anime, that being Go Lion, or Beast King Go Lion, right? But with the American version, they kind of toned it down or tamed it a bit, as America always does, unfortunately, where they turned it into, the special force of space explorers. You never got the hint that they were explorers, in any of the seasons of Voltron that you'd watched in the 80s. As to where, particularly with season 2 of Voltron Legendary Defender, you're really getting, this notion that, okay, these guys are trained space explorers, right? Like that exploration part very much comes into it. And you have these, these great, it's just so good. Like I said, everything they're doing, and we know now, due to the end of season 2, again, spoiler alert, that Prince Lotor is going to be coming in, and I can't wait to see that. And I hope they kind of stick with the sexiness that the original Beast King Go Lion had with the character of Prince Lotor. Of course, he had a different name back then, but this is a guy who's getting massages and has women all around him and everything, getting fed grapes and all this shit. And I sort of hope they stick with that. And I also hope that they keep building on some of the relationships, perhaps, with Princess Allura. I think there's some really interesting things that they could pull off with this. In fact, one that I kind of hope happens, because, again, this is sort of the same team that has been working with, Legend of Korra and all that. And, the entire Avatar universe has done a pretty good job, be it on the cartoon or in the comic books or whatever, where they explore alternative relationship styles. Whatever that may be, lesbianism, however that ends up shaping up. Personally, I would love, because you're getting this sort of odd triangle with Sven, Keith, and Princess Allura. And frankly, I'd love it if Princess Allura ended up with both dudes. Or the other thing that I really hope, that's coming up for season 3, I hope they add in more female characters, even though, I mean, Voltron's, Legendary Defender is already breaking ground with the fact that you had, you had a female character that was, pretending to be a dude and all this. I mean, not that that's necessarily anything new, but, Pidge, the character of Pidge, I mean, was seemingly going through most of her life, pretending to be a guy and all this. I mean, there's, I don't know. I really appreciate kind of the social issues that they dig into. I mean, all under this very exciting, and just action-packed little cartoon. that Netflix has done. And Netflix has been great in the turnaround. Like, I don't think they expected season 1 to be that popular, but I mean, inside of, well under a year, they pumped out season 2, and I hope season 3 comes quick too, because you're sort of left with cliffhangers. As far as I know, season 3 is already in development and everything too. So this is great. If you haven't watched Voltron Legendary Defender, you are in for an absolute treat. And it is, in most metrics, it's far superior to the original content. I mean, I don't know if I like it more than I like Beast Control, but whatever. Anyway, thank you so much. That's enough for Sovryn Tech this week. If you want to help support the show, please don't hesitate. You can donate in Cash now. You can find that in the show notes. Or you can become a patron. Okay, just go to SovrynTech.com and you can become a patron right there.
You just experienced
I'll see you on the other side.
Sovryn Tech. Go to SovrynTech.com. That's SOVRYN Tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.